Good morning, everyone. Welcome to The Climate is Changing, Why Aren't We? By Youth Red Cross VIT. Today, we're going to talk about our world and how the climate is changing. And we thank you all for joining. I, Sana Dhawan, and my team will be speaking on a series of topics under the changing climate. So, what is climate and how is it different from weather? You might know what weather is. Weather is the changes we see and feel outside from day to day. It might rain one day and be sunny the next. Sometimes it's cold and sometimes it's hot. Weather also changes from place to place. People in one place might be wearing shorts and playing outside. At the same time, people far away might be shoveling snow. Climate is the usual weather of a place. Climate can be different for different seasons. A place might be mostly warm and dry in the summer. The same place may be cool and wet in the winter. Different places can have different climates. You might live where it snows all the time, and some people live where it is always warm enough to swim outside. The Earth's orbit can trigger changes in climate, such as the beginning and end of ice ages. The last ice age ended about 12,000 years ago, and the next cooling cycle may begin in about 30,000 years. But orbital changes are so gradual they're only noticeable over a thousand of years, not decades or centuries. There's also Earth's climate. Earth's climate is what you get when you combine all the climates around the world together. Now, what is climate change? Climate change is a change in the usual weather found in a place. This could be a change in how much rain a place usually gets in a year, or it could be a change in a place's usual temperature for a month or season. Climate change is also a change in Earth's climate. This could be a change in Earth's usual temperature, or it could be a change in where rain and snow usually fall on Earth. Weather can change in a few hours. Natural external causes, such as increases or decreases in volcanic activity or solar radiation. For example, every 11 years or so, the sun's magnetic field completely flips, and this can cause small fluctuations in global temperature up to about zero point 0.2 degrees. Before handing it over to our speakers, I would like to say that if anyone has any questions, they can put them up on Instagram during the event. They will be addressed later through our Instagram stories. Now, the first topic we'll be starting with is G20 Summit 2021 on climate change. Our first speaker is Aryanshu, who will be elaborating more on this topic.
Thanks, Anna. So, G20 Summit 2021 on climate change. Actually, G20 is an informal group of 19 nations and the European Union, with representatives from the International Monetary Funds and the World Bank. The membership is made up to the world's greatest advanced and emerging nations, accounting from around two-thirds of the world's population and 85% of the total GDP. That is what I mean to say is this is a powerful group and can really make an impact. That's why their policies on climate change are really important. Let's see some of the points that are discussed in this summit. The first one was the roadmap for the COP26. COP26 is the next annual UN climate change conference. It stands for the Conference of Parties. It asks leaders of the world's greatest economies to present their action plans to address the global climate change challenge at COP26. This conference also constitutes a forum for the actors from across the globe to draw the attention to their projects. This is an important step forward in the run up to the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Glasgow. Now, moving to the next important point discussed in the summit was restricting aid to coal-fired power plants. This is one of the main points. It include a vow to stop financing coal-powered plants in other countries by the end of this year. But as we know that this will affect the developing countries like India adversely, so India asks to restrict the total CO2 emitted in a year from a country by accounting on how much CO2 that country has emitted since the time of industrialization. This will help in preventing the climate change due to CO2 emission while not affecting the developing countries' development. And the last one was about PPP financial mobilization module. This module speaks about public private partnerships. As we know that these are the only method to mobilize the billions of dollars in an yearly investment required to transition to clean, sustainable sources, reduce global warming. This is really important for the countries like UK and US to produce a cleaner, greener energy on large scale and also can share this clean energy to neighboring developing nations. India is also improving its PPP and commits to reduce the CO2 emission to net zero by 2050. The G20 is focusing on three broad international interrelated action pillars in 2021: people, planet, and prosperity. I really hope that these plans and policies discussed in the summit will make a difference and bring a change in this world. Thank you all. Over to you, Sana.
Thank you, Aryanshu. That was really informative. Next, we're going to talk about global warming and human extinction. Global warming is the long term heating of Earth's climate system observed since the pre industrial period due to human activities, primarily fossil fuel burning, which increases heat trapping greenhouse gas levels in Earth's atmosphere. I'll be passing on to Ishita to elucidate on this topic.
Thank you, Sona. Several extinction level calamities have occurred on this planet throughout the history. The bulk of these occurrences were caused by natural disastrous forces beyond the control of any living being forms at the time. The current destructive forces are far from natural and we have complete control over them. Millions of species, including humans, will ultimately become extinct as a result of climate change. According to the Center for Biological Diversity, global warming is currently the greatest threat to human and life on Earth. Global warming is projected to commit over one third of the Earth's animal and plant species to extinction by 2050. If current greenhouse gas emissions trajectories continue, a catastrophic loss that would irreversibly reduce biodiversity and alter both ecosystems and human societies across the globe. In fact, more than a million species may be at risk of future extinction due to global warming, and we are already seeing the first extinctions. Moving on describing global warming. Global warming has a number of detrimental effects on the environment that many species will be unable to deal with in the long run. Extreme weather patterns are contributing to global climate change, damaging ecosystems and altering topography. Food and freshwater supplies are fast depleting as a result. Then there's the matter of rising global temperatures, which many species are unable to cope with due to their physical limitations. The previously frozen Arctic and Antarctic regions are melting, resulting in rising sea levels and temperatures. These elements will ultimately come together to form a perfect storm of extinction conditions. BBC reported on a 2020 study done saying that polar bears could go extinct by 2100 if nothing is done to address climate change. Arctic sea ice has been shrinking from the warming of the planet. Polar bears rely on the sea ice to hunt seals so they don't have to go on the shore. The melting of sea could force polar bear populations to decrease rapidly. According to Center for Biological Diversity, more than 30% of Earth's plant and animal species would be extinct by 2050 if global warming continues at this current rate. By the end of the century, that figure may have risen to 70%. Moving on, we have a little more than a decade, according to the conversation, to cut carbon dioxide emissions. If we do not cut emissions in half by 2030, temperatures might rise to potentially disastrous heights. Although it may only appear to be a fraction of a degree, the global effects are immense. Humans are an adaptable species. Even if these extreme climate predictions come true, we will live a little longer, but it will mean less food, less water, and greater suffering all around the world, especially in lower income areas and emerging countries. This surge will result in more pandemics, severe storms, and uncontrollable wildfires. Moving on to Sana.
Thank you, Ishita, for those amazing facts. That was really educational. Moving on, we'll be covering fossil fuels and human ecological footprints. Fossil fuels are made from decomposing plants and animals. These fuels are found in the Earth's crust and contain carbon and hydrogen, which can be burned for energy. Coal, oil, and natural gas are examples of fossil fuels. Mehek will be speaking further on this topic.
Thank you, Sana. Fossil fuels and human ecological footprint. As we all know that fossil fuels are the foremost reason for the climate change. So first of all, let us know what fossil fuels are. So fossil fuels are formed from a decomposition of buried carbon-based organisms that died millions of years ago. They create a carbon-rich deposits that are extracted and burned for energy. They are non-renewable and currently supply around 80% of the world's energy. They are also used to make plastic, steel, and a huge range of products. They are of three types: coal, oil, and gas. So let us know that how big is the impact of these fossil fuels on the climate change. The Intergovernmental Panels on Climate Change (IPCC) has found that the emissions from the fossil fuels are dominant cause of global warming. In 2018, 89% of the global CO2 emission come from fossil fuels and industries. So let us know that how these fossil fuels impact on the climate change. So first is coal. Coal is the dirtiest of the fossil fuel and is responsible for over zero point 0.3 degrees Celsius of the 1 degree Celsius increase in global increased temperature, making it the single largest source of global temperature rise. Oil. Oil releases huge amount of carbon when burned, approximately a third of world's total carbon emission. There have also been number of oil spills in recent years that have a devastating impact on our ocean's ecosystem. Natural gas. Natural gas is often promoted as the cleaner energy source than coal and oil, but it is still a fossil fuel and accounts for a fifth of the world's total carbon emissions. So let us look at that how fossil fuels have their impact on our planet. So when fossil fuels are burned, they release large amount of carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas, into the air. Greenhouse gases, as we all know, that trap heat in our atmosphere, which lead to global warming. Already, the average global temperature has increased by 1 degree Celsius, and warming above 1.5 degrees Celsius risk further sea level rise, extreme weather, biodiversity loss, and species extinction, as well as food scarcity, worsening health and poverty for millions of people worldwide. Ecological footprint. Next slide. Uh, the ecological footprint. The ecological footprint framework addresses climate change in a comprehensive way beyond measuring carbon emissions. It shows how carbon emissions compare and compete with other human demands on our planet, such as food, fiber, timber, and land for dwelling and roads. Carbon footprint. Today, the term carbon footprint is often used as a shorthand for the amount of carbon, usually in tons, being emitted by an activity or organization. The carbon footprint is also an important component of the ecological footprint since it is one of the competing demand for biological productive space. Carbon emission from burning fossil fuel basically accumulates in the atmosphere if there is not enough biocapacity dedicated to absorb these emissions. Therefore, when carbon footprint is reported within the context of total ecological footprints, tons of carbon dioxide emissions are expressed as the amount of productive land area required to sequester those carbon dioxide emissions. This tells us how much biocapacity is necessary to neutralize the emission from burning fossil fuels. Measuring the carbon footprints in land area does not imply that carbon sequestration is the sole solution to the carbon dilemma. It just shows how the biocapacity is needed to take care of our untreated carbon waste and avoid a carbon buildup in the atmosphere. Measuring it in this way enables us to address the climate change challenge in a holistic way that does not simply shift the burden from the natural system to another. In fact, the climate problem emerges because the planet does not have enough biocapacity to neutralize all the carbon dioxide from fossil fuels and to provide all the other demands. Uh, this framework also shows climate change in a greater context, one which unites all the ecological threats we face today. Climate change, deforestation, overgrazing, fisheries collapse, food insecurities, and the rapid extinction of species are all part of a single, overarching problems. Humanity is simply demanding more from Earth than it can provide. By focusing on single issues, we can address all of its symptoms rather than solving one problem at the cost of another. Also, it makes a self-interest to act for more obvious. The carbon footprint is currently 60% of the humanity overall ecological footprint, and its most rapidly growing component. Humanity's carbon footprint has increased 11-fold since 1961. Reducing humanity's carbon footprint is the most essential step we can take to end overshoot and live within the means of our planet. Now, thank you, and now over to Sunny.
Thank you, Mehak, for your impactful inputs. Next, we'll be talking about carbon and land management. Mehak will further continue to explain this topic in detail.
Carbon and land management. Terrestrial ecosystem includes forests and grasslands. They play an important role in sequestering carbon dioxide. Carbon sequestration is basically a long-term removal, capture, or sequestering of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to slow or basically reverse atmospheric CO2 pollution and to mitigate or reverse climate change. Carbon dioxide is naturally captured from the atmosphere through biological, chemical, and physical processes, thereby helping to remove it from the atmosphere and lessening the effect of anthropogenic climate change. Uh, carbon dioxide removal techniques, which aim to remove and sequester excess carbon from the atmosphere, have been identified as an important part of the portfolio of responses to climate change and have been garnering increased attention. Forests, grasslands, agricultural lands, soils are significant reservoirs of carbon. As the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has increased, there is a growing interest in land management practices that can enhance and uptake the storage of carbon. Many scientists have believed that regenerative agriculture practice can turn back the carbon clock, reducing atmospheric CO2 back to pre-industrial level, while also boosting soil productivity and increase resilience to flood and droughts. Regenerative techniques studied includes planting fields year-round in crop or other covers, using agroforestry, polycultures, and a rotational grazing pattern. Rotational grazing pattern plan is the most relevant and a feasible technique for improvement of vast expanse of federal managed land. So there are a number of greenhouse gas mitigation actions that can help to reduce the effect of climate change. So, so by reducing greenhouse gas source and enhancing carbon sinks in forests and grasslands, we can help in reducing the effect of climate change. In ecosystem, carbon is one of the particular interest because of importance of CO2 and methane as important greenhouse gases, as well as the ability of the ecosystem vegetation to absorb and sequester CO2. Land management action can also affect the emission of nitrous oxide, another potential greenhouse gas. Although the role of forest and land management is small regarding this purpose. Forests and grasslands are managed for many different objectives and variety of goods and services, including timber, range, water, recreation, and wildlife. The amount of carbon absorbed and stored within a particular ecosystem is affected by land use change, management activities, disturbances, the use of harvested wood, and climate. Carbon may be of interest in developing management plans and options, but rarely it is the primary management objective. So, as per the UN report says human demand driving unpredictable depletion of natural resources. Today's UN Special Report on Climate Change and the Future of the Land Use make it clear that we must transform the ways we use land and produce food around the world if there is to be hope of keeping global temperature under 1.5 degrees Celsius. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change (IPCC) report shows we are exploiting our natural resources faster than they can be renewed, and that the land degradation and desertification at this scale poses significant, wide-reaching consequences for the well-being of the planet. The report makes clear that businesses as usual is no longer an option and the dramatic short-term action is required. Delays in reducing greenhouse gas emission undermines the global economy by destabilizing the ecosystem that underpin it through loss of biodiversity and jeopardizing sufficient food production. A failure to protect critical land and ecosystem will only exacerbate the impact of warming climate will have on people and economies. Conserved land not only sequester excess carbon but also provide natural protection to local communities against the worst impact of climate change. Carbon sequestration, local communities, and indigenous people are some of the best weapons in the fight against climate change. Thank you, and now over to Sanag.
Thank you, Mehak. That was really insightful. Further, we're going to dive into the topic climate change and its impact on food process management. Our next speaker, Haripriya, will enlighten us further here.
Thank you, Sonu. To dive into this topic, we must know that agriculture is, first of all, a very vulnerable factor when it comes to the environment. So the yield depends on the climate and how the weather varies from time to time. So now the impact of climate change on food production is antipathetic, which in turn raises food prices. Some areas face more ill consequences, like that of the sub Saharan Africa, where hunger and food insecurity rates are very, very high. Raised levels of carbon dioxide lead to decline in micro and macronutrients in crops like zinc and iron. Water supply extremes like flooding washes away fertile topsoil and droughts dry it out. Increasing temperatures in dry periods put crops in a variable position as they require a larger water intake. In acute situations, wildfires also arise. This does not help anybody's situation. Some pest species thrive in such arid and specific conditions, elevating their crop damaging capability. With higher temperatures comes melting glaciers that some areas depend on for irrigation and sea level rise that can pose flood perils on coastal farms. This does not help with the already sinking coasts. Saltwater intrusion infiltrates coastal freshwater aquifers, and acidification of oceans threatens sensitive environments and aquatic organisms. Seasonal changes alter reproduction and migration patterns, affecting fisheries. Pollination and other such services or ecosystems that also come under the agriculture sector face negative impact from climate change. All of this causes financial hardships to the farming community, as there is no security of when the yield shall rise. So, when it comes to the food management process, there are multiple steps, and these multiple steps augment or add on to climate change. These multiple steps include and are not limited to production, transport, wasted food storage in landfills, greenhouse gas emissions, or in short, GHG. This will culminate in widespread food insecurity, disrupting food availability and altering the quality of the food made available to human society. Livestock production tops the charts by contributing a whopping 14.5% of global GHG emission generated by anthropogenic or human activity. It's said that even if humans adopt green methods in the future and try to reduce their carbon footprint to all extremes, then the chances to stay below the 2 degrees Celsius increase threshold will be slim. This will be slim with the identical dairy and meat consumption that exists to this day. Significant reduction in meat and dairy intake, which is eating lower on the food chain, along with reducing our greenhouse gas emissions must from energy is of utmost importance and it is very vital. Modifying diets on a global scale must be implemented using national policies, and then only will we stay below the 2 degrees Celsius increase threshold that many scientists claim to be the maximum that climate change can yield to. Thank you. On to Sana.
Thank you, Haripriya, for sharing these astounding facts. Moving on, we'll be talking about what or who at present is the major contributor to the climate crisis. Ishita will be elaborating this topic.
Thank you, Sana. As we all know, the greenhouse effect is the primary cause of climate change. Some gases in the Earth's atmosphere function like greenhouse glass, trapping the sun's heat and preventing it from escaping into space, resulting into global warming. Many of these greenhouse gases are naturally occurring, but human activity is increasing their quantity in the atmosphere, particularly like carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and fluorinated gases. Human caused carbon dioxide is the most significant contributor to global warming. Its concentration in the atmosphere has grown to 48% over pre industrial levels by 2020. Human activity also emits low amount of greenhouse gases. Methane is a more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, but it has a shorter lifespan in the atmosphere. Like carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide is a long lasting greenhouse gas that builds up in the atmosphere over decades to centuries. Between 1890 and 2010, natural processes such as variations in solar radiation or volcanic activity have estimated to have contributed less than zero point 0.1 degree centigrade to overall warming. Moving on to emissions that are increasing for several reasons are carbon dioxide and nitrous oxide that are produced from when coal, oil, and gas are burned. We all know that coal is the single biggest contributor to anthropogenic climate change. The burning of coal is responsible for 46% of carbon dioxide emissions worldwide and accounts for 72% of total greenhouse gas emissions from electricity sector. If to build up to 12,000 new coal-fired power stations around the world are realized, the greenhouse gas emissions from the plants would put us onto a path towards catastrophic climate change, causing global temperatures to rise by over 5 degrees Celsius by 2100. This will have dire impacts for all life on Earth. Destruction of forests are also one of the reasons. Forests are a stabilizing force for the climate. They regulate ecosystems, protect biodiversity, play an integral part in the carbon cycle, support livelihood, and supply goods and services that can drive sustainable growth. Forests' role in climate change is twofold. They act as both a cause and a solution for greenhouse gas emissions. Around 25% of global emissions come from the land sector, the second largest source of greenhouse gas emissions after the energy sector. About half of these comes from deforestation and forest degradation. Forests are also one of the most important solutions to addressing the effects of climate change. Approximately 2.6 billion tons of carbon dioxide, one third of the carbon dioxide released from burning fossil fuels, is absorbed by forests every year. Estimates show that nearly 2 billion hectares of degraded land across the world offer opportunities for restoration. Increasing and maintaining forests is therefore an essential solution to climate change. Moving on, there are other reasons for that cause global warming, like increasing the number of livestock farms. Because when cows and sheep digest their meal, they create a lot of methane. Even nitrous oxide emissions are produced by nitrogen fertilizers. Equipment and products that employ fluorinated gases release these gases, and these emissions have a large warming effect up to 23,000 times that of carbon dioxide. The decade 2011 and 2022 was the hottest on record, with global average temperature rising to 1.1 degrees centigrade over pre industrial levels in 2019. Global warming caused by humans is currently growing at a pace of 0.2 degrees centigrade every decade. A 2-degree increase in temperature relative to pre industrial periods has major negative consequences for the natural ecosystem as well as human health and well being, including a substantially increased likelihood of harmful and potential catastrophic changes in the global environment. As a result, the world community has acknowledged the need of keeping global warming below 2 degrees centigrade and pursuing measures to keep it below 1.5 degrees centigrade. Thank you. Forwarding to the Sana.
Thank you, Ishita. That was really informative. Now we'll be covering our next topic, which is capitalism affecting the climate. Capitalism is an economic system based on the private ownership of the means of production and their operation for profit. This topic will be further explained by Haripriya.
Thank you, Sana. Now, to dive into capitalism affecting the climate, a common term used when we talk about capitalism and the climate is Anthropocene. Anthropocene refers to the modern geological unit consisting of modern man in today's era. It has no specific time period specified, but is a generic modern era. So the term Anthropocene shifts blame from capitalist corporations to the consumer. Let's elaborate. In 2017, it was found that just 100 companies from 1988 were accounting for a huge 71% global industrial greenhouse gas emissions. Now, this is a particularly small number for producing or contributing to a large amount of pollution. Excessive capitalism and climate change are bridged together, and this elicited radical reform movements. However, the World Economic Forum has made it clear that for a zero carbon economy by 2025, that is a very clean and green economy, for such a movement, the expenses skyrocket. So we must include multiple expenses to bring this about. But this leads to multiple developmental problems. Instead, fresh economic parameters must be set to move into a more sustainable economy. So now when we come to the corporate world, change is already being made in terms of having incorporated environmental, social, and governance factors in their annual reports. Furthermore, these companies prove to be better for individual investors by proving their long term performance. More companies are adapting to these new rules as investors look out for more sustainable options to invest in and demand full transparency. These capitalist structures are not just doing this, revolving around financial trends or to fit into normal trends that the society is following. No, no, this is also because of the dawning apprehension or the slow and late realization about the huge impact that the climate change has on our economy and our planet. Um, Sorry, my laptop seems to have hanged. Can I have a minute? Sorry for the inconvenience. Is it visible, my presentation?
Yeah, it's visible. You
Okay.
can continue.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so to continue, Rostin Benham from the Commodity Futures Trading Commission of the United States said that if climate change causes more volatile, frequent, and extreme weather events, you're going to have a scenario where these large providers of financial products cannot shift risk away from their portfolios. So now, in the modern world, which consists of many corporations, making modifications or alterations in capitalism is made so that the corporation operates in ways that will not only allow the weakening of environmental degradation, but will also help mend together the effects of the climate crisis. This basically means that the laws are now bent to fit around the present climate crisis that we are suffering. Resources will be used efficiently to spur innovation in green technology, and we must use funds to start investing sustainably. So, to tap into the market, around $26 trillion are estimated to fully bring about a sustainable investing community. Meanwhile, countries must develop different perspectives to view development and economic growth. As I said earlier, we must come about with multiple new economic parameters and factors to bring about a sustainable economy that will fit into our present climate crisis. An example of this is GDP. However, GDP itself has a few flaws. While GDP is a good indicator of economic performance, it fails to account for social and environmental expenses, and it thus provides an inaccurate development and growth results. We must come up with new factors and implement them in our governmental organizations that takes into account all such expenses that cover social and environmental sectors. Thank you. On to Sana.
Thank you, Haripriya, for those great facts. Next, our last speaker, Sovik, will be addressing political or global advances in solving the climate change crisis and also how can we, as naive citizens, inform ourselves and others.
Thank you, Sana. Political and global advances in solving the climate changes crisis. First comes the tropical forest restoration. The restoration of the tropical forest, both passive and active, is being increasingly popular. Trees, soil, leaf litter, and other plants absorb to store carbon when forest ecosystems re-establish themselves, removing it from the global warming cycle. Second, the carbon capture. Scientists attribute the Earth's growing average temperature to man made greenhouse emissions, which trap radiations in the atmosphere that would otherwise escape into the space. Carbon dioxide is one of the most major greenhouse gases, with CO2 concentration having growth of 50% since the Industrial Revolution started. Carbon collection, utilization, storage technologies are being employed to minimize CO2 emissions, with the net zero descent project being an interesting example. This this carbon would have subsist in safe place deep beneath the water, where it would no longer contribute to the greenhouse effect and may potentially be synthesized into a transportational fuel in the future. The United Nations Secretary General has identified six climatic friendly steps for the states to consider as they rebuild their economic societies. Investment must speed to the decarbonization of all the parts of our economy in order to achieve green transition, green jobs, and inclusive long term growth, making societies and individuals more resilient via a transformation that is fair to everyone and leaves no one behind is the goal for the green economy. Invest in long-term solutions. Forest fuels subsidized must be phased out, and polluters must be held accountable for their pollution. Face all the climatic threats. Cooperation is essential since no country can flourish on its own. Post-pandemic recovery strategies must generate long-term systematic transformations that will alter the trajectory of CO2 levels. in the atmosphere to solve the climatic emergency. Governments all around the globe have spent a lot of time and efforts in the recent years on strategies to help their inhabitants live a safer and more sustainable future. Taking these into account today as a part of recovery plan can assist the global in recovering more quickly from the current crisis. India is making strides on many fronts to ensure clean energy future for its citizens, drawing on its ingrained civilizational characteristics and implementing a wide range of policy interventions under the legal framework of Energy Conservation Act, which covers 15 energy intensive industries and energy conservation building codes which covers all the urban infrastructures. 32 Indian governments have developed a state and stated implementation of the respective state action plan and climate change. There is also a thriving civil society that promotes public knowledge of the problem and climate change and what each of us can do individually to combat it. It is believed that India's leadership in addressing its own climate change and energy security concerns would encourage other countries to contribute more to the global and grave crisis. Failure to do so will lead to an unpredictable and face devastating outcomes for the civilization. Now, coming up to the second topic, how can we as a native citizen save ourselves and others? The first point is reduce, reuse, and recycle. Reducing your needs to buy new products and results in smaller amount of waste, even if you need to buy, considering buying eco-friendly products. Buy energy efficient appliances and use them efficiently. Always buy products that are energy efficient as they can help you save a good amount of money on your energy bills. Turn off the electronic devices when you're moving outside for a couple of days or more. Necessary usage of electronic appliances will not save fuel, that is, coal will get electricity, but it will also increase the useful life of your gadget. Step 3. Look for a renewable fuel options. If you can't afford an electric car, buy the cleanest gasoline possible. When a car shopping, look for look at the benefits of the option that provides renewable fuel. Although it may be a pretty penny now, you are gonna ground a level for forwarding thinking. Number 4, go solar. Many people have caught the energy efficient bandwagon of the solar energy, having solar panels installed in something readily possible and available. Number 5, drive less or carpool. By driving less, you are not only saving fuel but also helping in reducing global warming. Also, look out for other possibilities, that is, carpooling. If you have a colleagues who live in the same area, then you can combine trips. Use more of the public transport as it helps in decreasing the overall level of pollution and help in saving the fuel. Number 6, go green and plant more trees. Using Energy Star appliances will not only save money but also a amount of energy wasted at your home. Have a look at various ways to go green. Planting trees can help much in reducing global warming than any other methods. They not only give oxygen but also take in carbon dioxide during the process of photosynthesis, which is primary source of global warming. Step 7. Start composting and reduce food wastage. Transforming food scraps and lawn clippings into fresh nutrient-rich soil gives home to gardens as a boost. Roughly 20 to 30% of what we normally throw out can be compost, and the process offers huge benefits like saving money on shipping organic waste like landfills and generating energy from methane. Food wastage poses a big problem and can be minimized by making small changes in your routine. Save food by applying smarter ways to storage preventions. Step 8. Conserve water. Taking a 5-minute shower will greatly conserve energy. A type of shower head use will also aid in combating global warming. Taking showers instead of baths, showers use less than baths by 25%. Over the year, that's 100 of gallons saved. And the final step, step number 9, is spread awareness. Always try your best to educate people about global warming and its causes after effect. Tell them how they can contribute their part by saving energy that will be a good for environment. Gather opportunities and establish programs that will help you to share information with friends, relatives, and neighbors. Thank you. Over to Sana.
Thank you, Sovik. Those were great thoughts. Now, to sum up, scientists think that Earth's temperature will keep going up for the next 100 years. This would cause more snow and ice to melt. Oceans would rise higher. Some places would get hotter. Other places might have colder winters with more snow. Some people might get more rain, other places might get less rain, some places might have stronger hurricanes. Just as a reminder, all of your doubts will be addressed on Instagram stories, so make sure to put them there. I'd like to thank everyone for coming and interacting with us. I hope everyone enjoyed while gaining some knowledge about how our climate is changing and how we contribute to it. Now, I'd like to conclude by saying we can do things to stop the climate from changing as much. We can help by using less energy and water, turning off lights and TVs when we leave a room, turning off the water when brushing our teeth. We can also help by planting trees. Another way to help is by learning about Earth. The more we know about Earth, the more we can help solve climate problems. Once again, thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you all in upcoming events.